Welcome to the first episode of Inside Real Estate. I am Jeff Edmiston with Coldwell Banker Elite.
And I'm Kim Thagholm with Alcova Mortgage.
What Inside Real Estate is a time for Kim and I to sit down together as a realtor, as a lender, and just have conversations about what's happening in the real estate world. We do this a lot. We felt like that our clients could benefit from that as well. So today we're going to talk about getting pre-approved. From a realtor standpoint, this is something that is always a topic of conversation. It's something that is very interesting to me because at times you'll see people who they don't want to do it. They don't want to get pre-approved with it before they start looking for a home, and it seems like, I don't know if that's a feeling of not wanting to be pressured by a real estate agent, or if it's a feeling of fear, or what the case might be. But as you and I know, there are a lot of good reasons to do that, to get pre-approved.
Yes.
Before you go out looking for homes. From my perspective as an agent, is very important. It's not what you think. It's not just so that I know you can buy a house. It's so that I can help you buy the right house in the right terms, the right conditions.
Right.
From a lender's perspective, how do you see that?
Well, from the lender's perspective, what I come across is people that, usually it's a couple. And one is the person that's going to be the logical buyer that understands, okay, this is what I want to pay and I don't want to pay any more than that. And then there's the emotional buyer who just walks into a house and falls in love with it. I just have to have this house. And so I want to make sure that they're pre-approved for them and for you, to make sure that they don't fall in love with a house that, one, the other person logically doesn't want to pay for, or to make sure that they can actually qualify for it, so that there isn't an issue with that, because you hate to disappoint anybody. Show them a beautiful house and then all of a sudden say, oh, no, sorry, you can't buy that.
Yeah, and it's not just, from my perspective, it's not just that they fell in love with a house that they may not financially qualify for. It's, from my perspective, they might not be able to buy that house with that loan product. When I'm helping them find the right home for them, certain types of loans, certain homes, because of geography or condition or whatever, they may not qualify for. It also helps me from a negotiation standpoint. I know what things are important to them, important to them getting the loan they need, and those are the things that I can more strongly negotiate. But it's so helpful going into it to know those things.
Yeah, and I've found that it does make a big difference for you guys when you're negotiating on their behalf, because I look at it like I work for them. So we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to get them the best deal for their long-term plans. So if we need to make sure that we have closing costs, we need to make sure that you know that and you know how to negotiate that. Or if we know, like this morning I was looking online, a client asked me for a payment. Okay, so I look at the house online and I'm going, oh, okay, well, this room has no carpet and studs on the other wall. So this is a completely different type of loan program. So those are the things that you want to talk about with the lender to make sure that they understand what it is you're trying to achieve, either long-term or, what your immediate need is for the house. So I think that's a big deciding factor when you go out shopping.
Great point. Yeah, a great point. In application for me, there are homes that we should never even walk in the door of because of the specific type of loan program they're going to use, especially if that's the only type of loan program that they can use. And sometimes that's the case.
Right.
For sure.
And that's the only type of loan program you can do on that property, but yet you need to make sure they're pre-approved, because you need to know, do you have the funds for the down payment for that type of a loan program? If there's somebody who's looking for 100% financing, we need to know that, to steer them away from those types of houses so that they don't get frustrated while they're looking.
Very good point. Very good point.
Yeah.
Why do you think, I guess let's change gears a little bit. To me, getting pre-approved at being the first step is like putting gas in the car. You don't even start your trip until you know you've got gas in the car.
Right.
And I think it's the same thing for buying a home. You should do that, to determine the type of loan program. Another thing that I like to do, and it's not necessarily what all realtors do, but I like to know going into the process that my client has a ballpark idea of what a house payment is going to be, not how much they qualify for, but in this price range, what this payment is, so that I know we're comfortable.
Right.
And I also know what type of loan product, like you said, do we need to find something where, condition is in a certain way, or what. But I think that's the logical starting point. And we know there's, some emotional disconnect from a client standpoint, not wanting to do that necessarily. What's the process? What's the process like? What do they need to do to get pre-approved?
Well, the first thing would be to call. And going back a little bit to what you were talking about earlier, sometimes I think they don't want to call and get qualified because why am I going to waste my time if there's not a house out there for me? So that's something that we kind of talk them through when you're talking to your client. And all basically they need to do is just give me a call. Give your lender a call. Takes probably a good hour to go through your application and know exactly, at that point, they can get to know you, what your future needs are, what your future goals are, to make sure we're buying in the right market, buying at the right price point, and do we have a down payment? Makes a big difference. So I think the initial thing is just a phone call. And depending on that phone call, the next step would be, let's gather your documents in so that when you go out with your agent and they find the house for you, you're ready to move on it. But the biggest thing is it's really a conversation that really needs to happen, and then kind of go from there.
Okay, so I'm gonna put myself in the shoes of a consumer for a second. Am I gonna be pressured during this conversation? I mean,
Not for me.
Should I be?
No.
And that's really what I wanted to get at. From an agent perspective, I don't work for Kim. Kim doesn't work for me. We each individually represent our clients. From my perspective as to what she does, and I think probably vice versa, if someone's being pressured, that's not the right person to work with.
No, it is definitely not, because you don't need that. This is the biggest decision you're going to make. Okay, and you want to make sure that you're comfortable with it, that you trust them, that there's integrity, and you know they're actually working for you. Makes a big difference. I mean, I know that for us, that's a very important part for us with our clients, but knowing that we've got their back when we're negotiating or when we're deciding the loan program, and I don't decide it, I let my client decide it, but when we talk about the different programs, because there's so many that are out there, you need to make sure it's the right one for you. So I think, again, it all goes back to talking to the person, the agent, the lender, making sure you're comfortable with them and that you trust them. That's the biggest first step that you need to make.
I agree. And any part of this process, trust is a huge component. I have to kind of smile because in the background we got window washers going on here, showing on our video. So the documentation, I'm sorry, did I miss it? Did you talk about what that looks like?
No. Documentation a lot of times will depend on the loan program that you're doing, and it also depend on what your credit looks like, whether or not we can just do a W-2 documentation or we need full tax returns. So again, I tailor that to my client. I send out the list. Basic information would be your income and assets, so pay stubs, bank statements, W-2s, driver's license. And then kind of from there, it kind of gets customized if you're self-employed or what type of a loan program we're doing. One loan program might require 3 years tax returns. Another one only requires 2. So again, it goes back to the communication and making sure everybody understands it and setting the expectation so that, it's stressful enough. We don't need to make it more complicated.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So again, from a consumer standpoint, if they call you specifically, spend 30 minutes, an hour on the phone with you going through this process. A couple questions. How long until you can say, yeah, here's what we need to know. Here's ballpark what your payment would be this price point. You qualify, that sort of thing. I can give you a letter, a pre-approval letter. And then the second question, does that commit them to you, working with you, going forward and buying a home?
No, it doesn't commit them to working with any particular lender at that point. And I really don't mean to sound evasive, but depending on how quickly you get that letter depends on your loan program, depends on the documentation, and depends on the credit when you pull the credit. If you've got somebody that's got an 800 credit score and they're working for the same employer for 15, 20 years, I'd probably do a letter. Okay, basically on a real quick, basically what you've told me I'm trusting kind of pre-qual. But I would always then call you, the realtor, and say, okay, this is where we are, and I still need my documents, but just so that you understand, because I want you to be able to have the best negotiating power with them, with the other side. So it just kind of depends.
Okay.
Sometimes I can do it very, very quickly. Sometimes I can do it in a day or so.
Okay.
It just depends on what we're trying to accomplish.